Jordan, you've got me in actual tears.
Thank you.
But you have got to be one of the most inspiring people I've ever met.
Thank you.
And I wanted to say thank you for sharing this with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're going to be an inspirational speaker for many years to come. I think you've got it in you, and I think you've got a huge life journey ahead of you. You were always meant to do something amazing, so it's coming.
How would you have wanted the people close to you to react when you first came out? What was the most meaningful responses you got? What really helped you? How can people out there really be there for someone who is coming out?
I think the biggest thing is certainly just to say, I love you like for who you are, irrespective of who you choose to love. And I suppose in my presentation of what I said is that some people had turned around and said, I always knew, George. And I think that part of it actually ate away from me more than that made me feel comfortable with who I was. So I actually, as I think I've said today, what is the biggest power is love. And I just would think if anybody who was close to you came out saying that you love them for who they are, no matter what, is the most powerful.
I question whether your gender should be a limiting factor to which schools you could apply to anyways.
Exactly.
Especially when it's so skewed towards all boys schools. The quality of schooling in South Africa tends to be skewed, like the highest paid schools or the highest costing schools tend to be boys schools. Just given that these schools still exist, that all boys schools do exist, what sort of things would you say they could do to just improve? If you have anything that you've thought about, I know that you're really passionate about that topic.
There were so many things that needed to be corrected on a transformation level, not even just about sexuality, race, religion, everything. I think it would be, there needs to be some sort of like knowledge sharing or a specific class where they start engaging in these type of conversations, being like, if you actually have feelings for a boy, that is okay. If you are unsure of your sexuality, that is okay. We always had life orientation, and what were we taught about? Heterosexual relationships. I'm a gay man now, right? Did I learn when I was 17 years old how I'm supposed to interact with a guy? No. You know, it's like, it's those small little things that actually it needs to be brought into the curriculum such that actually, okay, let's open the conversation. So I think, Mike, answering your question, I think on an education level is where it needs to be brought in.
Representation.
Yeah.
The difference that you've experienced with kind of being an activist.
Yes.
When you were perceived to be heterosexual versus now.
When I was perceived to be heterosexual, there was firstly a level at which, when I was in a conversation, I was taken more seriously. Whatever I had to say was deemed to be, oh, okay, Jordan's got a good point of view, let Jordan talk, you know? But interestingly enough, which has been an interesting observation through the process of Zoom calls, as we've all known now digitally, people just don't listen to me really as much as they did before, which has been quite an interesting observation for me to come to terms with, which has been my first thing. And then my second has been, okay, well, on Instagram, say for instance, I was like really uncertain about sharing things on my story about just like LGBTQ plus rights and like really empowering stories. And the one day I got a comment from someone after I'd come out like, oh gosh, here Jordan starts as the activist. And then I thought to myself, well, this is quite an interesting topic because I choose to promote my sexuality of the acceptance of others, I'm now an activist, but yet I have to listen to all of your posts about Super Rugby highlights on your story. Not like I'm incredibly interested in that. Am I criticizing you for posting it? No, it's okay. I'm going to post about LGBTQ plus rights, and that's something that should be celebrated. So I think that was just something that I really started to experience as well, which I thought was quite interesting.
Can I say something on that? I think it's also like, I think I can relate to that in like at work when I say something like in a client meeting, I could say the same thing as like someone next to me who's my age, who has the same tenure as me, but because he's a white male with, like, let's say, a British accent, I feel like I'm not taken as seriously. And I can feel it in a client meeting, in the boardroom, that just because I sound like the way I sound, and maybe my voice is a little squeaky sometimes, it's just like no one listens to me, right? And and like posting things about feminism as well. And it's like, I remember I got a comment one, and it was like, we only follow you because you post like nice pictures. You don't have to like have a voice or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
like,
a good one.
Those are the people that said it, and I just can think about all like the other people that like thought that just comes to their mind, you know. So.
No, and it's the idea that you're too pretty to think that. Sorry, you're too pretty to chat about this. Sorry, it's a big thing.
It's like annoying if you chat about it. Like, why is it annoying?
So I just want to talk, like, in general, how much do you think when someone is inauthentic to themselves, that like how much that creates a barrier for them to allow other people to be authentic?
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting question. I suppose if I just had to speak almost from my path and like my understanding, well, because I don't think I was authentic for a lot of the time, because I was wearing this mask of being like, got to maintain this certain image and got to do X, Y, and Z. And from my path, is that I never used to let people in, because, and I used to push away, interestingly enough, people who were authentic with themselves, because I always used to look at them and be like, they inspire me because they're living their truth, but I'm going to pull away because I can't acknowledge something within myself. So wearing that mask for me was that barrier, I think the first part, and because I never used to let people in. And then the second part is, I think, I never used to let authentic people in, because the truth, when they shared their truth, I couldn't share mine.
So the first question is, at university, you can often choose your circles to be in. And how much do you think you chose a circle that didn't allow you to be you? And how much could you have prevented that? Then the second question is, I think this is a very early on to be asking a question like this, but do you see yourself having a family? Like, what do you see in terms of that in the future? Like, do you see Daddy Jordan? And
100%, without a doubt.
And then
university circles and my uni friends, really. I think, and this actually also tracks into Abdullah's point about being authentic. I think I used to legitimately think to myself, okay, let me choose the norm. So let me choose heteronormative groups because I felt safe, because I was like, oh, wow, these people are normal. No one's different. I feel comfortable here. And I think because I actually was homophobic myself, it was a comfort for me because people in those circles were very much the same. I mean, look at the example I've told you tonight. I had people in my friendship circle calling me a closet homosexual or teasing me about the way I danced or etc. or anything of those nature. So I think, to say I did pick those uni circles away in a way like quite wisely because they were comfortable. And I somewhat
perpetuated almost what was going on inside.
Yeah. And like when I look back at it now, do I wish that I did branch out more? Yes, definitely. I think I went through a great deal of pain and self-loathing towards like the end of last year in my 4th year of uni. So it's a pity, but then yet again, it was also, if I look back at it, if I didn't reach that low last year, it was the catalyst for change.
Yeah. About how there's a stereotype of what gay people need to look like and lesbians and all of that. And I just, like, for people who will be watching this, because I know we're posting it, I just want people to try shy away from always expecting gays to be extravagant and loud and, dramatic. Like, I know with us in the Black community, we have those few known gay people. your Somizis, and his husband and everything, your Lasizwes and all of that. And they're all very extravagant and they're in entertainment. And everyone laughs when they're on stage or whatever.
Flamboyant.
Which kind of makes it hard for your non-extravagant, your macho, your rugby player gay person. So just going forward, I think people need to be very aware that that's not the only type of gay people you get. Why society seems to be a lot more accepting of lesbians than gays and any of the other LGBTQI plus community. And also your movies and porn and all of those things do play a role in that, because lesbians making out is seen as something so sexy and hot. And then with like gay men, it's like, shut the camera. People who think like not being hetero is a choice, like people are choosing to not be normal. Why would you deliberately put yourself through suffering and judgment from society? Like if you could be normal, why would you want all of that hate and all of that shame that you have to carry? To learn and unlearn. I know coming from KZN and then going to school in UCT in Cape Town, like location is so important and it allows people to come out. If someone came out in KZN, I don't think I would have been able to embrace them the same way I was able to do at UCT.
So like being in Smuts with you for the first couple of weeks and going through like O Week and like res culture, I would just love to hear from your perspective what that was like for you. I just like looking back at it now, I can imagine. So I'd just love to hear you talk about your experience in Smuts during O Week.
Yeah. I think something about coming into Smuts, which I think made me retract from it even more so, was because I came from a private boys' school, like boarding school as well. I was a boarder. And when I came into Smuts, I was coming to university with the expectation of freedom. And I felt like I walked back into the environment of an all boys res. It was like this culture of like, oh my God, like we've got to like play sports together and we've got to do all these like bonding activities, which I remember like I really appreciated, but it made me feel like I had to step back into that mold. And I think it made it quite hard for me in a way, because I didn't feel I could break away from that masculine role, which is no criticism to Smuts, because I know some people loved it. However, just talking from my perspective and I think my feeling, it felt like I stepped back into that toxic masculine culture, which made me feel very unsettled.
Smuts, because maybe there is more than one way for boys to bond than just the stereotypical way of how things have been done all the time.
Exactly.
And maybe people like it because that's all they've known.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And yeah, another thing on that is coming from Fuller, I can tell you the toxicity that Smuts brought. I will say vehemently that Smuts is a breeding ground for toxic masculinity to continue and go. And I could get into a lot of things, but I'll get into that later.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Okay, but I think, can you guys hear me first?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think most of the boy raisers were like that, but that's not the topic. I think the concept of coming out places a bigger burden on like gay people and like people part of the LGBTQ plus community, whereas hetero people never have to come out and say, hi, mom and dad, by the way, I do like boys. You know,
it is. I couldn't agree with you more. It is 100% an issue within itself, because if you think about it, the personal conundrum that I used to face in school was, okay, I actually want to go, I don't know, kiss James, and I don't actually want to go kiss Sarah, but I could never have done that because, well, imagine what people would have said about me. And the thing about coming out, it is so extremely personal. Everybody does it in a different way. But I do think it places a burden on people in the LGBTQ plus community because, we live in a heteronormative society. So anything if you're not heterosexual, you are different. And I think that's why it's so difficult for people to come out and acknowledge exactly who they are.
How do we move on from this? How do we take what you know and try and eradicate this culture, because the thing is, it's such an insular environment that I think that it's going to be perpetuated for, I mean, I know that there are changes and they're incremental, but how do we fundamentally change the culture that is in the primary schools, the high schools, the universities, like sports teams, parent circles, like it's just so prominent that I just wonder how to change it.
I've got 2 points on that. So I think the first idea, and I know I'm going to say it again, and I've said it a lot, but the lady even told me about it properly this morning, but basically summarize what I'm talking about is heteronormativity. So if you think about it, films, books, and everything that we learn about love, about relationships, is in a heterosexual relationship. So if I had to say from like a primary school level, or from certainly like people in our younger generation, there certainly would have to be some sort of shift in that regard. Even just about like the movies we watch. You look at the backlash that Hollywood on Netflix just received because people are under the impression that we're starting to force gay characters onto people. So we live in this conundrum that people are like, oh my gosh, this is not normal. So how do we get past that stumbling block? The second point, I firmly believe that it's breaking the tradition within the schools. So if you take the private school, say for instance, that like I was a part of, most of the events that happened at the school were it's because it's a tradition and it's normal and it's what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to celebrate, from rugby to sport to it. I think the tradition needs to be broken.
You have to come out, and why do you think? And the thing is that I tried the whole not coming out thing. I was like, this is just how it is. And I was forced out. Someone took a picture and put it on Facebook. So the thing is that you try that. You try everything. You try not coming out. You try, sorry, it's just getting emotional. I tried everything. Everyone was accepting. Everyone. And then something like that happens. And it's a problem. It's a real big problem. So it's just, everything is flawed. Everything, any way you can go about it. Yeah. Whereas that you having to deny everything for years and years and years because you felt that you had to come out. You couldn't just kiss a boy one day at a party.
Yeah.
And be fine, and everyone would be like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
It's a major thing. So, speaking about allyship, so what can you do to be an ally to queer people? Why do you think people have not or would not want to come out to you? Because that's a big thing, is that people are like, oh, but I'm sure Jordan can understand. People, I'm sure, said, oh, but why didn't you come out to me? You know, like, I'm totally fine. What do you think that there's a situation that makes you not an ally, you know?
I personally find it challenging sort of being supportive to, I find it easier to be supportive to friends who have come out than to friends who have not come out publicly but have at least told me. I find that a particularly challenging situation because I don't want to give them up. Like, that's their story, that's their deal. And especially in like guy friend groups, it's challenging trying to always be on their side without ruining, or not ruining, but you know what I mean, without telling their story. Yeah.
Of someone asking me was like, I still think about it today, and like I can actually, it's traumatic because, you know, but then why do we still struggle with this, you know? If I want to go kiss a guy, like, why is this an issue still, you know? Which I find like a very interesting concept, like what ladies, you've just spoken about in your experience, you know? Why can't we just see people kiss whoever they want? And even if they're experimenting, or even if they're unsure, or even if they're confused, why don't we let it happen?
Since grade 5, and this makes me so happy that this has happened after seeing all of this sort of injustice that happened at school to him and to others. So my question has 2 parts. The first part it's both to do with school, but the first part is about just the idea that it seems that all of the toxicity, or at least the vast majority of toxicity that we speak about, comes from institutions that are all boy institutions, right? And so just before I carry on, I'd love to ask the question to everyone in this conversation who went to a co-ed school, whether toxicity on a level like this existed. And if not, then perhaps we should be asking the question about whether institutions like schools that are all boys should actually exist.
I went to a co-ed school for varying degrees. I've just gone to. It was astonishing the amount of, it's because you're on a level playing field. So you have to deal with a whole bunch of different people at different levels. And so you can hang out with whoever you wanted. Of course, there's still some toxicity that happened, but we had quite a few out people. I think it's a massive difference because you're not taught that you're all the same. You must all be the same. You can't all be the same because they at least agree that there's a difference in gender.
I think it is worth saying in school. I went to Westerford, which is obviously one of the more progressive schools. And there still was a level of that. Obviously, my experience of it was probably quite limited as someone who wasn't always particularly conscious and is straight. But anecdotally, the toxicity or the sort of homophobic sentiments that I did view were in the cases of people who'd come from single-sex or boys' schools to a co-ed school. Almost, like, I would put that number at 90% of the cases.
Spicy.
So, in support of your point.
Yeah, it was actually really weird because when I went on exchange in grade 10, I went to the US and was also at a co-ed school. And it was quite a privileged school. They weren't insanely progressive on a lot of these issues, but at least 50 people in the school had come out of the closet. And I remember that really blew me away. That was back in 2013, and that's like a whole decade ahead of where we are now, more than a decade. And that really struck me.
That I found is the school is really limiting to letting them express who they are. I remember when we got to matric, one or two of the girls wanted to invite a female partner, and the school didn't let them.
A girls-only school, so there was a boys-only counterpart, and now I have a younger brother who goes to a co-ed school. And it's quite interesting to see the things that they have or the transformations in place. Like there was a conversation about single-sex bathrooms and how can that be a comfortable space for people. And that was a conversation I think he had when he was in grade 9 with like his grade group. So it was really nice to hear these conversations happening. And I was wondering do you think those conversations are happening in schools like the school you've been to? I know you said you're involved in transformation. Do you think it's happening across the board, or maybe just because like I just heard a nice story from my brother and now I'm hopeful about the future?
Interestingly enough, the transformation group only included minorities. They did not include the 90% white majority at the school who needed to be speaking about these topics, which is what used to disappoint me. And no one used to see the bigger picture as being like, we're not dealing with the elephant in the room. So
the white elephant.
The white elephant in the room. We're not dealing with it. So I think to comment on that from my perspective, from what I'd worked on with the transformation, it was quite disappointing.
Yeah.
I can just comment on that briefly about, because my brother, as I said, is at the same school that you were at, and he's currently in matric, which he said the other day that I just saw him on a Zoom call, and he came to the dinner table and was telling us about, it was like a group of children from all different schools who had formed like an alliance of people with different stories of feeling ostracized or like excluded at their schools. And it was very interesting because, you know, from the school you went to, there were quite a few boys who were involved in it with their stories. And it's interesting almost how like there's kind of a network being created to share experiences and for people to kind of like bring awareness to other people's plights. And I think that that's something that I don't think happened in our generation. I don't think we really spoke about it.
It's like, it's the worst place ever. I love it, but it's homophobic, it's xenophobic, it's all the phobias you can get. Whereas Cape Town is a lot more diverse. Like, I remember seeing old white men kissing on the beach, and I was like,
yeah.
And my boyfriend was like, why are you doing a double take? You know, it's nothing. And I was like, I know, but I'm just imagining if someone from home was here, like, oh my gosh. And I really do think that people need to travel a lot more so that they can see a lot more and experience a lot more things, because there's no such thing as normal. And actually, I would be terrified if I was normal.
Which is that it's like you have to show all the way up to be associated within that community, which is a big thing. And then another thing about women coming out in girls only schools, the thing is the risk of you being physically attacked are less. In a boys' school, some of those, you can get beaten up for a lot less, and so that's also a risk factor. So,
that like being gay, they like talk about it like a choice. It's not a choice. Like, you know, you feel that way, and like no one can take that away from you. So I think even if that's just something that your first point that spoke about being gay, like linked to like your personality, that was also something that I just want to be like is a no-no. Partly why it took me so long to come out, because I was always like, I'm not going to be that like extravagant type, and like, you know, that it just wasn't who I was. So that led to such inner conflict, and I can't imagine what it must be like for something like we will call the rugger bugger to actually be like, I'm gay, you know. So I think that was a really good point you brought up.
Could I ask something in regards to like the idea that being gay is not a choice? Is that not just like the wrong way to be wording this? That like it shouldn't matter, right? That like if we're going to put homosexuality, heterosexuality, and any form of sexual orientation on the same thing, like it should be fine if it's a choice, right? Like you don't say like soccer or rugby is better because you're forced into one or the other, right? It's like, isn't a world in which it is acceptable to choose to be gay the world that we want to like say? Or is there value in saying like there is no choice in me being gay or lesbian or choosing my sexual orientation?
But Tamir, do you choose to be straight? Tamir? I don't know if you can
No. Well, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Like I
So-
guess
so
like,
this-
yeah, like in the
in
same
the
way,
same-
like I don't choose
so in
like
the
what I
same
like
way.
eating.
In the same way, if I don't choose to be straight, you don't choose to be straight, then Jordan doesn't choose to be gay. It's just how things are.
But the issue is that's a perfect world scenario is where we don't say it's a choice, right? When we know inherently that's inherent in everyone. But so many people, you'll be surprised by how many people think it is actually a choice that people make in order to be different within society, in order to be cool. Oh, it's the cool thing to, be like that nowadays. So that's the real issue, is that you can't be like, oh, well, why shouldn't we say it? We shouldn't say it's a choice. It's the right way to go about it, because it's the only way to say, look, nothing you say is going to change the way this person feels.
I hear what for me is saying, I think it goes with the fact that like some people aren't really sure where they fit in, so they can choose to experiment, and that should be allowed. And also, I don't think I don't think sexuality is like a straight black or white. There's so many new categories that keep getting added on. That's why there's that plus at the end. So if you if you define yourself as being lesbian today, and then you discover that there's actually something else, and you're like, oh, actually, you know, I fit more with this other letter, the letter Z or whatever. So I think you've got a point when you say that it can be a choice, because you can choose to just be lesbian, or you can choose to be bi or whatever. Yeah. And it shouldn't be bad if you choose. Like it's okay to experiment.
Like language is a choice. The language you choose is a choice. How you feel isn't a choice, but the language you choose. Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, listen, categories suck, man.
Yeah. I do agree with you, Tamir, though. I know what I do agree. Because also, like, when I was at university, I actually was in a long-term relationship with a girl. And to be honest, like, frankly, I did love her, you know, like, I really did. And that what was so conflicting about coming out was like, did I really or didn't I? But like, and I actually came to the conclusion that it was okay. Like, I did love her, you know, and maybe I was confused at the time.
I lost a friend 2 months ago. He was a gay activist. He stayed in Umlazi in Durban. He was brutally stabbed. I think 21 stabbings on his body. So much pain because I'm finally going back to to loving myself again. But he played such a huge role in my life, and part of my identity of being a queer man. I think he played. I'm getting quite emotional. Very broad term. So within transformation as well, that you find even here in Cape Town, Black queers find it really hard to live in this space because it's dominated by white gays in Cape Town. Even pride has lost its meaning of being something that's celebrated by everyone, no matter the race or background. But now it's seen as, oh, you're going to the white gay party. I think transformation goes deeper, and I hope one day that activism leads into those rooms, whether
Cape Town's like white gay culture. It is. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever felt this, but like Cape Town operates in pods. So it's literally like people operate within bubbles, and it's really hard to break through those bubbles. So I can actually I center it to you on that regard. It's like, well, any gay outside that, it's like, well, not sure how accepting we are of that, So I fully support exactly with what you're saying. Pride should be a day where we celebrate everyone, not just one specific part of LGBTQ+.
Saying like older generations or people or parents of color are maybe more opposing to it, and I don't want to generalize, but I think maybe cultures or people's opinions tend to be more on than maybe not so accepting view. So when children do have an opportunity to come to university and finally get out of the shadow expectations of family members, it's difficult to take up space because you have so many other layers of where in society you're already seen as a person of color. You have that struggle. Now you're gonna add another layer to that. So I don't. What tangible and realistic steps can we take for society to become more inclusive? There's a lot of talk about what needs to be done, but not necessarily how we can actually start bringing about these changes.
I think our sort of answer I would have to that, I mean, I'm sure Ruby can help me along the way here if I stumble. But just within a legal framework, I think obviously the law has got a very important role to play in obviously recognizing people's rights. I think across the world, different legal regimes have dealt with this differently. I mean, in places like Uganda, I mean, I think you still pretty much, you can be killed, if you come out as gay or anything. By the government, exactly. And then there are obviously places in the world that have liberalized their rights and their legal regimes a great deal. But I think bringing it back to SA, I think from what we sort of learned was that it's this idea of, liberalizing the legal regime, but it always comes up one step short on being par with your classical marriage. So it's always like you need to have your own classification of marriage. It's not, you're not going to be brought under the same legal regime as a normal husband and wife. So I think often it'll seem on the surface very like a liberalized legal regime and that we respect the rights of homosexuals. But often within that, the deeper meaning of the law, it's actually still very unequal.
Culturally, marriage, and certainly in South Africa, the urban society is centered on like classic Christian ideas of marriage, and a quite obviously homophobic, or at least in its implementation, homophobic mentality, right? Religion and law in countries that still like no liquor sold on the weekends except at certain outlets. That's like an archaic law from religious leaders making legislation. So how do we separate those two things is one question on the legal side. And then there's like culturally, how do we create a society that doesn't base its perceptions off of a religion that a lot of people don't even believe in anymore? Like, I mean, I think I did look at the stats at some point, but something like only a third of Americans now actually go to church still. But a lot of them will still claim that being gay is wrong because of the Bible, even though they're not practicing religion other than like giving gifts on Christmas.
Great constitution, you know, everyone's equal, woo woo, happy days. But it's about actually following through with those laws and implementing them in a proper way. And that's the real issue, is that these are not being implemented within society.
Just commenting, you know, conversion therapy is still legal in some countries. So we still are trying to like jump past that hurdle, which baffles my mind. You know, how can people still think that it's okay to, you know, try convert someone who identifies as whatever sexuality to be straight?
Wasn't Mike Pence advocating for electroshock therapy for homosexuals?
Oh, Mike Pence is doing everything. He's doing all the things.
The vice president of the biggest so-called liberal arguably, but so-called liberal country in the world is saying we should shock the gays. It's a great time to be alive.
Too young to learn about these things. I think people have this idea like, oh no, don't tell the kids. Like, they're going to freak out. Like, they still learning math. How are they going to figure out this as well? Like, I was watching a video yesterday about, I think it was a woman, and she was marrying her fiance, and he happened to be transgender, and they were explaining to like her cousins or something that he was born a woman and then decided that didn't feel like a girl, so decided to change. And like the two nieces were like 7, and they completely understood. They were like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like, they weren't phased about it, and they were like, okay, cool, what time, like, can we go eat or whatever? Like, it really didn't faze them. And they understood that he didn't feel right as a girl, and then like, you know, they simplified it a lot down, obviously. And then reading the comments, they're like, oh my god, how can you do this? How can you, like, I'm so for transgender, but like not the kids. You know,
I think it's rooted in like the deepest misconception, because there's the quote unquote conservative perception is, oh no, you're going to turn the kids gay, like you're going to tell them about it, and they're all going to, you know, like, yeah, it's the same fundamental issue as the idea that it's a choice.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to change is how you speak, how you say things. And I especially think the whole thing about like when someone comes out being like, oh, I expected that. We need to change that.
And it's within the queer community as well, like big. You're always trying to guess who's going to come out next. Like, it's a sad thing. Like, a lot of people are trying to guess who's going to come out next.
Yeah.
Carrying the baggages of, you know, your old self, where, you know, when you see something or within your own community that even your homophobic behavior hasn't changed. So how do we now say, I'm the newfound Sizwe who loves himself for being queer, and yet I still carry the hate that I was born into in school, of, you know, always trying to hide myself behind my prefect badge, and I was scared that if, you know, someone were to out me, I would lose all the respect. And losing respect in a boys' school it leads to a spiral of things. It's a deep, dark hole. You enter, you go to the bullying phase. It's horrific. So how do we move from here? Because, you know, the how in transformation is so important. And it starts with these conversations, having hard conversations, and, you know, also educating people that just because I'm gay, it doesn't mean that I'm a Somizi. Because even with the whole image of Somizi, when everyone says I'm gay, within the black community, it's like, oh, you're a Somizi now. That means you're flamboyant. Well, you know, maybe I'm not flamboyant. Maybe I'm just a normal gay Sizwe. But we need to unlearn so many of those things, and it's so difficult. We can't expect it to happen overnight. But education system, humanity courses should be a language that we eat, breathe, and live by every day, because they teach you about, sexuality. It shouldn't be, when you come to university, we laugh when someone says, I'm in humanity. Or we lack that. We lack those conversations within commerce. We lack it in engineering. Let's start having them as a normal thing. Imagine having, a lecture of, about sexuality or gender as something that's happening right now. These are the circles that we start with our circles, but we protect our circles so much that sometimes we're clinging on to that normality because it fuels us, and it just protects us from going deeper into the dark hole of self-discovery.
Difficult, because there's a big issue with the average level of emotional maturity that different courses attract. I mean, like everyone knows the engineering stereotype, right? And you can see when we get like the inclusivity, I don't remember, the OIC, Office for Inclusivity, or is that right? Anyways, when they come and do talks, nobody's listening. Like, even if they are listening, they're like not engaging, or they immediately dismiss the content, or the person delivering the speech is a little bit camp, so everyone's like, I don't have to listen to this.
And I thought maybe just doing the bare minimum, not even the bare minimum, it's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing, having to tell yourself that you love yourself. It's the biggest thing that you have to sit down with yourself and say, I forgive me for doing this. I forgive me for being so horrible and so, like, showing so much hate on yourself for being different, or not even being different, for being human. Let's say human now. From now on, moving onwards, let's say human, not gay, not straight. But even with that, it's so difficult because, the politics that go into that, it's something we can't just hide away behind the human element. We need to speak about these things. And it's similar to race in South Africa. It always goes back to the grassroots. It takes us back to those basic values. Race is has a psychological detriment on Black people's lives, and it's for generations to come. I might be, in my family, I might have broken the cycle of poverty, but there's so much healing to go into that, even for the generations that come after this. I think
How much have you struggled with re-identifying yourself? Have you been able to be the same Jordan as you were before and after? How easy has that process been? I mean,
Can I just add to that?
I still see you as the same Jordan, but is that fair to say?
How do you think people's expectations of you have changed now that you've come out?
Dresses.
It's always been really great.
Yeah, it's always been wonderful.
One thing is that I think it's been so much easier with girls. I'm just going to be dead honest. Girls have been...
They want a gay best friend. Oh.
Yeah, because, a lot of my friends have been like, wow, I now have a gay best friend, which was my first issue on the girls' side. On the guy side, that's a challenge. I'm very lucky, like my two closest guy friends are incredibly accepting of me and they won't view me differently. But I can tell you easily that the greater guys in like my friendship group and whatever, there is a difference and I can feel it, which is hard. But at the same time, I've also just come to terms with it that if someone can't really truly accept me, that I'm still the same Jordan. I still want to have the same conversations. I still want to do the same things like on the weekend or whatever. It's just a pity. And I do think people's expectation of me has changed. And this is the whole interesting dilemma of the gay best friend. I think some girls think like, oh my God, like, oh, Jordan, like, come on, like, tell me what I'm going to wear, or like, tell me what Insta post I should, like put up, or like, do I look good like this? Or like, oh, I I know you're gay, but like, what should I post on Insta? And I'm like, okay, who am I? I never used to do this before for you, so now why must I do it now? Do I have some special superpower that tells me guys are gonna like this? Or like it's like that interesting dilemma that I face now, Rubes, that I think like it's like, what do you say, or like people are like, I can't wait to go to gay clubs with you. And I'm like, also something that I realized by myself, I think like the whole drinking culture for me was a whole mask and a whole like facade for me, because it was so easy to cope. And I was like, but what happens if I don't want to do that,
Anyone, but how do you get over what people said to you?
Me, I had to get over all of that before I came out. And it actually gave me such a sense of relief, because once I actually did more research into it, once I really understood like heteronormativity, for example, understanding homophobia, like what's the root of it, it actually gave me such a sense of relief that I was able to look at those people who did tease me and who did bully me and just be like, well, it's a lack of consciousness. They just don't understand. It's not okay. But to me, it was almost like, I'm not going to change them and I don't need to.
I think like big ups to you for being in the place you're at, because I think the people that hurt you so much are people very close to you. People that you looked up to, people that you confided in. And I think that's very difficult to open yourself up in the way that you have and be as vulnerable as you have and just being yourself, and for people to reject you, treat you like that. That's very strong of you, and I wish you all the best with dealing with that in the future.
Yeah. No, it's incredible. And I think this is the start.